Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Jane Gunn. I'm Dean of the Faculty of Medicine, Dentistry and Health Sciences here at the University of Melbourne. And I'd like to really thank you for joining us for tonight's discussion on tips to navigate Year 12 exams and life beyond school. But before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the elders, both past, present and emerging, of the Wurundjeri people, who are the custodians of the land that I'm on. And I also acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which you're situated on this evening. Tonight's event is the third in our series this year as part of the faculty's In Pursuit of Health. It aims to bring the community together to discuss issues that are important to them. We've also this year celebrating a milestone 150th year anniversary of the Royal Children's Hospital. And this year's series is focused on child and adolescent health. We hope that tonight's discussion is going to provide students tuning in with some insights and tips into managing their wellbeing during the exam period, which we're just about to enter into, along with some study tips and practical advice on how to approach the next phase once exams are finished. It doesn't seem that long ago since I was facing my Year 12 exams. So how time flies. I really hope that you find tonight's session enjoyable, and I'll be back at the end of the session. I'm going to first of all welcome the panel members. Professor Sarath Ranganathan, who is from our Department of Paediatrics, is moderating this discussion, and I thank Sarath for his time. This is the third in the series, so he's getting an old hand. He is the Stevenson Chair and Head of the Department of Paediatrics at the University of Melbourne. Also, welcome back to Dr. Michael Carr-Gregg, a child and adolescent psychologist, author and broadcaster, and once again returning for another In Pursuit of Health series tonight. And Professor Lena Sanchi, welcome back Lena, Head of the Department of General Practice at the University of Melbourne. And Professor Sandra Milligan, thanks so much for your time this evening, Sandra. You're Enterprise Professor and Director at the Assessment Research Centre at the University of Melbourne, and certainly I'm going to bring a lot to the discussion this evening. And most importantly, Katerina Bitsios, who sat your Year 12 exams last year and has first-hand experience, the most recent of anyone on the panel, in our topic of discussion this evening. So I'd like to welcome everyone. I hope you enjoy the discussion, and I'll see you again at the end of the session. Over to you, Sarath.
Thanks very much, Jane, and welcome to you all. Thanks for joining us. Who are you? Well, we've had almost 1,000 registrants, and half of you are Year 12 students, and the other half are parents of Year 12 students. Really appreciate that you've spared the time to join us, and we hope that you enjoyed this panel discussion. All the panelists appreciate that Year 12 is a very challenging time, and no more so than over the last couple of years. And hats off to you all. It's usually very stressful in Year 12, but you've had the added burden of remote learning. You haven't been able to play sport or socialize. So particularly difficult time. And I'm hoping within that context that you find our panel discussion quite helpful. Personally, I grew up in the UK, so I didn't do VCE or any of the exams here, but I can also appreciate some of the stress. I'm still recalling some of those nightmares where you actually wake up and miss the exam, or you sat the exam and it's actually the wrong subject. That's a sort of measure of the sort of stress that we're talking about here. But to get the panel discussion going, I'm going to invite Katerina, who had all this stress last year, to just let us know, what were you feeling about your Year 12 this time last year, Katerina?
Hi everyone, hope everyone is going well with their studies so far and their holidays. And in response to your question, Sarah, personally this time last year I had quite a mixed bag of emotions really. There was always a sense of anticipation for the exams, but also anticipation to get back to school, to get together with your friends, to see your teachers again, and also hoping that some of the end of year events would still go on. And on top of that, of course, during the holidays and the final weeks of school, there was always this underlying feeling of stress and expectation, which I presume many of you might be experiencing. Personally, I wasn't stressed about the actual exam or the exam time, but more so for me, that was like something that was inevitable, something that I couldn't control at the moment. But what I was stressed about was like the day-to-day happenings. So I'd always be thinking, have I done enough today? Like, is my work up to scratch? Have I done enough practice exams? Have I done enough practice essays? So for me, that was the most stressful part, not knowing if I'd done enough. And there was always like this sense of when you had done something, there was always something more to do. So although you're ticking things off, it can feel overwhelming because it's not like there's an end of the list. And reflecting on that now, it's a bit like, I think of it a bit like a project. There's always something to do. You can always fine tune it, but you have to like give yourself credit for what you are doing and what you have done as well. And just finally, I guess I also felt like so grateful for my teachers and all the support they offered as well. Definitely that's what got me through the end of the year. And because of them, like we're pretty fortunate, I guess, that we do have these like online interactions and they're always there to support you. So they're always great for if you need to reach out to.
And Katrina, you also went through a year 12 with lockdowns and all the other issues in Melbourne. So congratulations for navigating through that. What are you up to at the moment? What are you studying?
Yeah, I'm doing a Bachelor of Design at Melbourne Uni. So yeah, I continue to study straight after school. Similar online environment again, but what can you do?
Well, thanks very much. I'm sure you wouldn't have designed our current situation, but well done for getting through that. So are there some practical bits of advice that our panel can offer our listeners today? It can be a bit of a lonely time, and studying with friends was something that I remember doing. Michael, what advice would you give in terms of sort of allaying some of that isolation? For example, should people buddy up or work with their friends in some way? And how can you do that in a lockdown situation?
Look, I think having a study buddy or a group of study buddies is a brilliant idea. I advise many of my clients to do this. Doesn't suit everyone, but my experience is that it improves the quality of your notes. You can share your talents. You've got a little support system. You can cover way more material, and in many respects, it makes learning fun. There's been quite a bit of research into the actual components of buddy study groups that work well. The idea is to keep the study group between 4 to 5 people to see whether or not you can make sure that the people have common goals. You want them to all to be sort of quite keen to do work. The where of the study group is very important, an environment without distractions. And they've even been researched to show the ideal amount of time, which is about 2 to 3 hours. And there is proven advantages of starting at the same time in the same location. So for me, I'm a huge fan of having a study group. Recommend it wholeheartedly.
Is that something, Katerina, that you had a buddy when you were studying?
Not necessarily online. Obviously, it was a bit hard, but like you do try to keep in contact with a few people, asking questions to, working out together, I guess, which is good and helpful.
Excellent. And so it's a stressful time, Michael. One of the things that stress does is it sort of prevents you sleeping properly. And I imagine it's quite important to get some rest if you want to concentrate on your studies and exams. What advice would you have there? And after that, maybe I'll hand that question also over to Lena, because I'm sure you'll have some advice too, Lena.
I'm sure my old friend will have some very wise advice, but I can quote the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, which recommends that anybody aged 13 to 19 should get somewhere between 8 and 10 hours. There's an interesting study by O'Cano and colleagues from MIT, which was published a year ago, and they looked at the relationship between sleep quality, duration, and academic performance. And I think a lot of the advice given previously didn't really have a very solid evidence base, but what this particular paper found was that the better the quality of sleep, the longer that you spend to sleep, and the greater consistency of sleep was very strongly associated with better academic performance. So in order to get a good night's sleep, the three sort of basics for me is to try and go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time, to dim the lights about half an hour before you go to bed, and to try not to have a major conflagration with anybody before you go to bed, sort of remaining reasonably calm. But Lena, I'm sure you can add to that.
Thanks, Michael. I think these are common sort of self-care strategies, especially during COVID. And I'd probably add to that also a good diet if you can, sort of plenty of fresh fruit and vegetables, and get some exercise to get rid of the edge of that anxiety. Because quite often, especially as you are all approaching now that the final term and the lead up to exams, you really want to be in the calmest state you can be. So scheduling your day, planning when you might need a break. If you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, that might be time to be a bit flexible with your schedule. Take some time out and do the things that you really enjoy, and set a timer on it. Give yourself maybe 10 minutes every hour to take a breather and go for a walk, or catch up with a friend, or family. Have that support network around you. And I think for families, it's also a time, particularly as you're heading toward that pre-exam period and during exams, that maybe you can have a negotiation with family about being relieved from chores and having some support from the family. So I know that some of my colleagues who've had young people going through year 12 have taken time off work just to be around to provide some support, cook meals, do those sorts of things, maybe be a bit more relaxed around your young person doing chores, that maybe during this time they can have some protected time, and other family members can also respect that time as well. I think, and understand that your young person will be a bit stressed. And I think for young people themselves, don't try and shove down that anxiety, because that's a normal part of performance, and just acknowledge that it's there. Be kind to yourself. Just say, look, what I'm doing is, I've done this amount of work, and reward yourself for effort. Don't worry so much about the outcome, just reward the effort that you're putting in. I think there's some high level tips at this point for wellbeing.
Thank you both. One of the things you mentioned was around diet. I have a lot of trouble with my kids actually encourage them to have breakfast in the morning. I've sort of given that up. I seem to remember some sort of evidence that was an important meal of the day. Has anyone got any comments on that? Michael, perhaps, and then anyone else can chip in too, but go ahead, Michael.
Yes, there's actually an article in the paper today. So we've got very up-to-date news. A British study, which had a nice big fat sample size, which I know you researchers love, 10,000 students, and they were asked about their breakfast and about their mood and their academic performance. And what they found in this study was that skipping breakfast, or just having an energy drink, which many of my clients do, was associated with a much lower quality mental health. And it really is quite sort of axiomatic, really. The brain runs millions of processes every day. It never stops working, and it needs constant topping up with the fuel that it operates on, which is glucose. And the body simply obtains glucose from your food. And because your brain can't store glucose, you need to top up your levels each day. There was a recent study that showed that we have an equivalent capacity of 2.5 petabytes of memory capacity. And if ever you needed, you'll know that a petabyte is, I think it's 1,024 terabytes. If ever you need that memory to be working well and to fuel your brain well, then you kind of think about, as Lena said, the proteins, the antioxidants, the omega-3s, the dietary cholesterol, the monounsaturated fats, all of that stuff, very, very important. But it boils down to the research, which shows that up to 32% of students, and I think that's conservative, actually skip breakfast before school. Clearly not a wise strategy when you're trying to sit the general achievement test, or indeed the VCE or IB.
Lena, so we need our wheat bix for our petabytes. I'd never heard of a petabyte before. Anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that is important to have breakfast and snacks, healthy snacks if you can. I mean, certainly, and I remember doing this myself, you might have a coffee hit or a glucose hit. That will last momentarily, but it wanes very quickly. So you do need those complex carbohydrates and proteins and good healthy food to tide you over to have that base level of energy. And if you're a bit low in vitamins and iron, it's probably a good idea to get checked out by your doctor and maybe take some supplements, because that can contribute to tiredness and poor concentration. So, yeah.
Okay, let's move on to another area about trying to get the memory working, and so that the study is effective. People have used sorts of tips for that. One might be, having those cards and reading out stuff out loud, or listening to music. That's probably Mozart for you, Michael. For others, it might be Kanye West. What are your comments on that? And Michael, you go first. Sandra, if you have any comments that you'd like to mention in relation to this, I'll ask you after Michael has a go.
Oh, thanks, Sarah. The Mozart effect is absolute BS. Francis Rauschauer and colleagues did this study in 1993 where they investigated the impact of listening to Mozart's Sonata for two pianos in D major on spatial reasoning. And they actually published this in Nature. So it was peer reviewed. It's quite a good study. They created 3 test conditions where people had silence, verbal relaxation instructions, and Mozart. And all they found was a temporary, very, very short-term enhancement of spatial reasoning. There was no increase in IQ simply because it was never measured. So this was a media beta. Subsequent research and all the meta-analyses on this, listening to music, does it improve your learning, has actually been found to show nothing at all. And it's actually been listed as one of the 50 great myths of popular psychology. So what music does do is improve your mood. So in that respect, there's nothing wrong with listening at all. My greatest study tip for anyone about to do year 12 is called the production effect. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, Sarah, but it was a paper done by McLeod and his colleagues in 2010 and published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology, which I suspect is not bedside reading for you, Sarah. But in this paper, the researchers got people to look at memory for an item of a list of words. And they found that if people studied this list by reading half of the words silently and the other half by saying the words out loud, then the words spoken out loud were remembered much better than those that were read silently. So one way of improving your recall for particular facts is, in fact, to speak them out loud. So there's some practical psychology.
Well, thanks very much. And I hadn't heard of that journal. I have heard of the other one, Nature, and that's a really good one. So if you publish something that says Mozart isn't going to help you in Nature, it probably means that Mozart isn't going to help you. I also suspect there's not been a paper about Kanye West that's gone to Nature. But Sandra, any comments on anything that you've heard there? Because your expertise here is really valuable.
Well, I was really cross to hear that Mozart doesn't do it, because I'm a great listener to Mozart and I always put down any success I had to that, so I'll have to rethink. But just picking up on that reading out aloud point that you made, Michael, one of the things we have in teaching is that if a student reads silently compared to reads aloud, compared to write it down, you get better and better. But at the absolute top is if you teach it to someone else. So if you teach it to someone else, it sticks in your mind. So I don't know, grab your brothers and sisters or your mum or your dad, teach it to them, and you'll find that you're on top of it, I would think. So that's an extrapolation, Michael, of what you were saying, I think.
Lovely.
Thanks for that, Sandra. That's great. So I'm going to come back to Katerina here. It's exam day. we're all really stressed. So you can start us off and we'll go around the panel. Do you have any advice to a year 12 student on exam day itself?
I think that's a tricky one because I'm sure there's like heaps of advice. I think.
What did you do to calm your nerves or to improve your own performance, or what you thought would improve your own performance?
So there were some like subjects I was particularly stressed about, like physics, for example. I'm sure a few of you heard of it, like meditation. Like I genuinely just went to the bathroom, like took a few deep breaths and even 10 minutes just to really calm down, and then going to the exam room with like really clear headspace. I found that really helped.
That's great. Maybe Michael, what would you advise?
Oh, well, the most important thing is to get obviously enough sleep. I would set an alarm so that I don't sleep in on that day, because in fact, I'd probably set 2. I'd eat a healthy breakfast full of things like eggs and yogurt and blueberries and avocados and maybe a little sprinkling of nuts. I'd leave plenty of time to get to school on that day, and I'd actually walk the last 5 minutes. So I'd get somebody to drop me off about 5 minutes away. Stay away from stress heads on that day. That is just really important, because that's not going to help you. And I love the idea that Katerina had of a bit of de-escalation of the nervous system. So mindfulness, meditation, a little bit of yoga. One of my favorite things to tell my clients to do is actually to use an app called Smiling Mind, which is a mindfulness meditation app, and that's very, very useful.
Yeah, and I'm sure we can, when this goes online, we can put the links to that when we post this. Perhaps Sandra, any tips for the exam day itself?
Oh, I'd say stay away from stress heads. I think, if you're very responsive to people and they're all saying how wonderfully they've done, or that they're going to do, or that they're going to fail, it's catchy. I don't know. So yeah, do it your way. I think it's hard to say, isn't it, for the individuals?
Lena?
Yeah, I think back yourself. I used to say to myself, well, I've got to this point, there's nothing, I can't cram a whole year into one night. So I'm just going to rest up, do the best I can on the day, and reward myself for the effort of turning up and being applied on that day. And I think we sort of are sometimes describing ideal environments. And I just want to also say to all of you that you can dig deep, you can do almost anything, even if you faced some adversity in leading up to this. So you may not have the perfect study environment at home, or there may be interruptions or losses that you've had. Just be proud of yourself that you've got to where you are, that you've actually made it to that exam day. And it's just a gateway. It's not the be all and end all. Once you walk past that day, there will be many doors you can go through. It's never the end of the world. And I think if you're preparing yourself before exams, it's great to think of the plan B, a few plan Bs actually, if you're that way inclined. It doesn't matter if plan A doesn't work out right now, there will be other options along the way. So take some pressure off yourself, be kind to yourself, and dig deep, and don't beat yourself up for not having studied enough or something like that. Draw a line in the sand and just be positive that you've got to this point and try your best on the day. That's all that anyone can ask.
On the exam day itself, when I used to sit the exam, when I turned that exam paper over, I used to just sit back and try and take a few deep breaths and read some of the questions and not answer anything. Is that seen as good advice? I'm not sure it helped me that much, but is that something that would keep you calm when you get that super stress of actually seeing your exam paper? Michael, perhaps?
I absolutely. There's another technique which I also recommend, and that is every time you've written a paragraph, conscientiously release the grip on the pen, take a deep breath, and then start on the next paragraph. We call these mini breaks, and these mini breaks just can make all the difference when you're sort of really het up, and that way you can just calm yourself down. I also, of course, my father always used to say, Michael, read the question carefully. because there's nothing worth, Lena's nodding, there's nothing worse than writing a whole page and realizing that you've not actually misread the question. I don't know if you've ever done that, Sarah.
I've never misread a question. I'm not sure that that's applying to me there, Michael.
Good.
But very easily done. My son,
Yes.
who's year 12, he's listening to this, and I know that he is very nervous about misreading questions because he's done it in his SATs. So, what if some of these things become overwhelming, and I want to move on now, perhaps invite you, Lena, to talk a little bit more about actually managing extreme stress and actually improving our well-being on the day or leading up to this, because for some it is quite overwhelming, and we think that may be even more so in the last year or two when we've had all these other things to deal with. So any advice for students experiencing that level of stress?
Yeah, look, I think that there are different levels, and hopefully from now on really practice some of these techniques of what's going to help you relax and calm down and be in the moment. So when you find yourself becoming overwhelmed, maybe take a break from the study itself and focus on the task at hand. Identify what's causing the anxiety. So I think sometimes it's the fear, the anxiety of not doing well, or what am I going to do, or I really want to achieve this, what if I don't? There's all these questions that come up. Don't just acknowledge that they're there and be kind to yourself and say, okay, those anxious things are there. That's understandable with where I'm at. I'm going to turn the volume down on that a bit. I know they're there, but let's find a way to distract myself on things that I enjoy doing, mindfulness, meditation, walking, exercise. Schedule some time to fit those things in, and then just break things down into small chunks that you can tackle and reward yourself for your effort. So you might say, well, I'm going to spend half an hour and I'll read up to here. And then gradually, as you start to do things, that anxiety will start to dip away, because not doing stuff, which is often commonly known as procrastination, also raises anxiety. So find a way to sort of calm yourself down, get in a good headspace and say, well, look, whatever I do in the next half an hour is more than what I had previously. And I'll just break things down, reward myself for effort, and gradually increase the time. And if you are, I think it's important to have your self-care loop. So who in your life might you go to if you're stressed, as well as things you might do? Is it family? Is it friends that you might ring and debrief with? And reach out to those people. But if you really notice you're not sleeping, you're not eating, you can't calm that down, I think then it's time to reach out to a professional, maybe your local GP. And as a GP, I see a lot of people in Year 12 that are anxious, and talk to them, and maybe have some help in a counselling way is also a potential benefit. And talk to your teachers. They're a wonderful support. There might be things that have been going on for you in your life that you think are quite small. I should be able to handle them. It's not necessarily the case. We have a lot of students, even at the university level, who've been through an enormous amount of things, not least of which is COVID. There might be other things that really would benefit from reaching out and getting a study plan with the teacher, consideration of disadvantage, putting that into place early, to, if you need some alterations in the way that you tackle exams, particularly if you have some established mental health issues, all that can be done and can be worked out with your teacher and your doctor and or psychologist leading up to, at this point on, really, I think. So, and school counsellors, those sorts of people. So I think identify when it's getting on top of you. If you're not able to control it with some of those simple strategies we've discussed, then maybe it's time to reach out for help. And please, that's what everyone's there for. We all experience periods of vulnerability in life, and that's the time in which we need to reach out for extra support.
Yeah, thanks, Lena. Michael, Lena mentioned procrastination, and I suppose that's linked in to actually motivating yourself. It's really hard often to sort of get yourself going and to actually address the tasks that you need to do. So any advice from your professional background as a psychologist about how to motivate yourself?
Yeah, I think you've got to figure out your why. If you know the benefits of getting the task done, you'll be a lot more motivated to do it. I'm a great believer in celebrating the wins, to make yourself a kind of to-do list where you actually write down your achievements, no matter how small, but track your progress. I think that if you can make a to-do list to help keep you on track, I would actually consider placing a sort of a due date next to each item. And I think that if you really if you're really stuck, then get moving, go for a short walk, do some stretches, because my experience is that that'll get you quite inspired. And don't forget music. Making a playlist of your favorite sort of upbeat motivational songs and listening to them, particularly when you need a bit of an extra push. I think those are marvelous ways to overcome a little bit of procrastination.
Thank you. Great ideas. Katrina, anything that you use to motivate yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Just breaking it up as well. Like, I agree, Mike, with what you said about the to-do list. I think that's a really great way, but also keeping it palatable as well, not putting like 10 million things on it to get done a day, just keeping it short and achievable. And then when you can tick it off, you feel much more motivated for the next day as well.
Thanks, Katrina. What I'd like to do now is to move a little bit to life beyond school, and assuming one set these exams. And then you have to forgive me because I didn't do these exams in Australia. So I'm really looking to Sandra to fill me in on how this works. So when you get your scores, how's that link into what opens up for you at university, Sandra? What's the actual process of all this?
Sarath, look, I think there's an official story about how it all works, and then there's the reality. So the official story goes something like, you sit your exams, you do your best, you get a high score, you get an ATAR, which is a ranking, you get an offer of a course you've applied for, if you're lucky. Then maybe if you didn't get a first offer, you'll get a second offer. Then you'll hop into your course, then you'll study for a few years, and then you'll graduate, and then you'll get a job, and it'll all be fabulous. That's sort of the official story. But in fact, for many, many people, it just doesn't work like that. That's the core basis of the organisation. But, you know, so many people don't even bother to get scored these days. Even about 8% of students who do VCEs go for a non-score, but that doesn't put them out of the running for anything. Those who are a bit disappointed with their ATAR might be surprised to know that only about 7 in 10 people who go direct from school to university actually get in on the basis of their ATAR. They usually use an ATAR plus some other consideration. So, you know, it can be consideration because something ghastly happened on the day, or a more long-standing consideration, or you're first in family. So there are a lot of reasons why you don't just have to go through that straight ATAR run. Then a lot of people take a gap year, they go and do some work. If you've been out of school for 2 years, they don't even ask for your ATAR necessarily. They'll take your experience in life and work and so forth. Even if you sort of do get in straight away, about 1 in 5 students when they get to uni realise they've made a terrible mistake, and they either drop out or change courses or whatever. So the moral of the story is there is no one way. If you are persistent and you know what you want, there are a myriad of ways to get what you want. I don't know if that helps, Sarath, but the ATAR and the direct line is not the line that many people take.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting just to hear if there are any examples of that would help people, because people are very focused on that number, and there's often a little bit of a sense that without that specific number, the whole life ahead of them is ruined in some way. And it's really, as you say, not the case. So what should someone do if at the end of the day that number isn't quite what they want to do? How should they deal with that? And what's the practical steps or process they should take next, Sandra?
Well, one practical step is to understand that the official story they'll read in the papers and so forth about what the minimum score is not the truth. So there's a lot of flex in that. And there's no doubt that personal representation and continuing to request is a good way to go. I'm not sure if I should be saying this, but squeaky wheels get the oil. So I think there's one thing, that's one thing. Another way that people go is, well, they didn't get into that course, but they'll get into a course very similar. And then they'll transfer during the first year as everyone changes around. Or they'll, there are many, many examples. I mean, it's not true that I would say a huge proportion of the cohort, probably as many as 40%, 4 in 10, do not take that direct route, and persistence is really important. The other point I'd want to say is I know this is probably not the time to tell you when you're just about to go into your examinations, and I hope that you do really well, but the ATAR and the VCE often do not measure the things about you that are going to really make the difference in your life. Like, they don't measure really huge persistence under adversity, which actually it may this year more, but usually it doesn't. It doesn't really have a go at creativity as much as it does just being able to hit the books. It doesn't go to capacity to collaborate, to social skill, to being good with people, to having empathy, all of those things that in the final analysis will make a big difference to you in your lives. So the ATAR and the VCE do not know that much about you. So you need to tell people about you and what you've done and what your passions are and what your interests are. And if you can get that across, regardless of your ATAR, and you've got some persistence, I think you'll get through.
Well, thanks very much, Sandra. That's a great advice. And even if a little bit naughty, it's nice to share that because it's real, isn't it? So I'm really grateful for you for your answer there. We're going to have a Q&A discussion very shortly. So if you have questions, put them in the Q&A. Before we do that, I'm going to give the privilege of the last comment to Katrina. So Katrina, you've been through all this. You've had your ATAR score. I just want to open up for you to give your final views on some of the tips that you've learned, if any of those resonate with you, some of the comments about Sandra about life being much more than an ATAR score, and the complexity of all the things that you achieve outside of an ATAR score and how they play into your life. So fire away. You can say anything you like to finish us off before the Q&A.
Beautiful. Absolutely agree with what you said, Sandra. The ATAR really doesn't reflect who you are as a person. Like, in all honesty, ever since getting it, I haven't really thought about it at all. And then life outside of high school is just a completely different ball game. It's not like anyone's going to ask you, oh, what's your ATAR? It's like, no, they want to know you as a person. And then whatever you choose to do after school as well, it's like you can start, like, you can start again. You can start defining your own path regardless of what the ATAR is as well. So I think for the final few weeks, just like keeping things in perspective, the experiences at school, like, you're going to cherish those so much more than like the number that you see on your screen at the end of the year. So yeah, just keep making the most of it, I guess.
Well, thanks to you, Katerina. Thanks to all the panel for answering the questions that I've posed at them. We're going to move now into a question and answer session. And there are already lots and lots of questions in the Q&A. So hopefully we've got time to address quite a few of them. Some of them have been upvoted, and so we're not going to select the questions. We're just going to go with whatever that you put in. I'll try and pick the most suitable panelists that might want to take one of these questions on. The first question is, how long from 1 month before the exam should we be spending on each year 12 subject that we're doing? And I think probably Sandra is going to be the best place to give a stab at that answer.
Gosh, look, I don't think I have an answer for that. It will really depend. I'm a great believer in people being nice to themselves and doing what they feel is in front of them at the time that they're most worried about. One of the things I was reflecting before about sleep was that often my brain works best when I'm asleep, which is maybe a reflection of what it's like when I'm awake. But loading up your brain on what you want it to do during the night, I think, is helpful. But you've got 4 or 5 subjects. I think Katerina's advice there was the best, really.
Yeah, just run that by us again, Katerina, in terms of, how much do you put into each subject?
I guess, it'd be a nice answer to say, yeah, I did a lot of work for every single subject. But I guess the reality of it, you pick your strengths as well. I'm not saying totally disregard a subject. You obviously have to do work for it. But yeah, I guess do as much as you feel you need as well. Like if you feel like you're lacking in a specific subject, just do like a practice test or look over your notes for that particular subject to get you back up to where you want to be.
Thanks, Katerina. We'll move on to the next question. My daughter doesn't like breakfast. She's having a protein ball and has lunch at 12:30. Is this good practice? And I think, Lena, as a GP, that you're probably best placed to answer that.
Look, I mean, ideally, we should have a wholesome breakfast. But look, I think at this stage of the year, if that's how the young person is happy and they function well like that, a protein ball has got a lot of nutrition and protein in it. I wouldn't be forcing them to have things that there's not going to really enhance their study style. So, look, that's okay. Maybe if she's getting up early or whatever, she can have that and then have a good lunch. I think you've got to be a bit flexible in this. I mean, if you had a bit of complex carbohydrate to go with that, that's fine. But, I personally wasn't a heavy breakfast person either. So I think if that's worked for you all year and you're happy with that, I would support that.
Okay, thank you, Lena. Next question, this one to Michael. Is the reading allowed in respect to hearing your own words? Or is it due to the vocalizing of what you see?
Bit of both. The point is that not every technique will work for everybody. The most important thing for me is for you to give it a go, see whether or not it helps you with your recall. Some people love the flashcard technique. I've got to go with Sandra. I think teaching what it is you've learned to other people is just a brilliant idea. And I always used to put it all out on a big piece of butcher's paper with a very, very thick texter. And because we didn't have computers or PowerPoint back then, let alone electricity, I just would stick everything up on a wall with some blue tack, and I would then try and educate my mother or father as to what it is that I'd learned. So I think that's the best piece of advice I've received today was from Sandra. Thank you.
We have had one comment, which is from a mother who mentioned that daughter's having a particularly difficult time watching this, and I think we can all appreciate that it's a really tough time, as we mentioned right at the beginning, year 12 plus all the lockdown, etc. So just want to shout out to all the people that are struggling, and perhaps Lena and Michael, we could just briefly mention some of the resources. we could also refer you to a previous In Pursuit of Health webinar that we did, which was specifically about how to cope with lockdown, and we'll perhaps put that in when we post this online. But Lena and Michael, just a quick comment on the sort of resources professional. You've mentioned GPs, Lena. Any other professional resources that people can turn to?
I think there's some wonderful websites, and Michael will probably have a whole host of other comments, but reachout.com, actually, even before coming here tonight, I briefly looked over that again. It's got some wonderful advice and some reassurance and strategies for young people approaching Year 12 exams, particularly in this COVID time. And so I really think that it would be useful to sit with them and talk them through and look at those things together, because quite often that immense anxiety, it helps to sit with someone to have a little bit of containment, to sort of go through some of those steps of self-care and planning and those sorts of things. And yeah, they're probably, and I think if schools, etc., are not as supportive, I wonder, you know, whether it's worth having an appointment with them to sort of really work through that, because I think that is the role of a Year 12 student coordinators, to really be able to assist with some of those management processes and loop in your doctor and psychologist if you're not getting much support, because there can be, together we can really make that sort of a support happen in the right way. Michael?
Yeah, I agree with you. Reachout.com is the absolute standout place to go for any student in this situation. And just be kind to yourself. You know what? The real message to take away from today is you're not your ATAR. Life will continue to be worth living irrespective of your score. And this is just the blunt instrument that measures one component of you. And it's actually, I've spoken to a number of vice chancellors who reliably tell me that it's not going to be the choice in a few years to come in terms of selecting students. So, and I can see Sandra nodding her head there. So be kind to yourself. The other resources that you might find useful is that app, Smiling Mind. There's another app on your phone called Reach Out Breathe that can help you calm yourself down. And there's another app called Reach Out Worry Time, which teaches you how to deal with your worries using a type of psychological therapy known as acceptance and commitment therapy. And that can be very useful as well.
Next question to Sandra. We'll just move to the next question, which is, someone's asked, what happens if they get sick on the day of the exam, and can it get rescheduled?
No, if you get sick, look, one major takeaway is that there's a whole industry out there that is trying to make you succeed. And for instance, if you get sick or you get run over or something ghastly happens on the day, there is a whole procedure that you can enter into, you can trigger off, so that the people who calculate the VCE, the Victorian Curriculum and Assessment Authority, they will then organise to go back, talk to your school, sort of work out what you would have got, and it will be all, no doubt, annoying, stressful, not what you wanted. But there's a whole industry there to support you. So if something ghastly happens, there are procedures. If you don't think you did as well as you should, go to your school and talk to them. If you don't quite get your ATAR, go to your university person and see if you can tell them about who you really are and why you should be let in. So there's a whole industry in schools, in the authorities, in the universities, who are really barracking for you to win. It probably doesn't feel like that, but there really is. And I think what Lena said is reach out when you run into trouble, because there are people there who are just dying to help.
Next question to Michael. Do you think being competitive is an unhealthy reason for motivation?
No, not at all. I think you can find lots of motivations, lots of different motivations. If that works for you, I'm a great believer in if it's not broken, don't fix it. So if that helps you, that's terrific. I just think that you have to be realistic in terms of the goals that you set for yourself. And if you can structure your life in a way that you can reach those goals without too much stress on you, you're looking after yourself, showing the self-care that Lena talked about. I loved her idea of the looping in people, particularly your GP and psychologist. Talk it through with them. Examine your self-talk. What are you in fact all about? Adolescence is about discovering, who you are. And some people have reached that point a lot earlier than others. There's no set timeline. I go back to the point of just be kind to yourself. Don't over-examine things. Just take it easy for the next couple of weeks. It's been a rough year.
Thank you, Michael. Next question to Lena. This is an interesting question. How do we avoid or deal with imposter syndrome?
Oh, okay. Yes, that's something that's very common amongst everyone at university. I think we all suffer from that, even the people with the... Look, I think it's a good question. I think that it's a feeling that you don't deserve something, or that you're not as good as what you think that people think you are, and these sorts of things. I think you just have to put those expectations aside and any opinions other people have of you, and just back yourself. Just say, I'm a person that has this goal. I'm working toward that. I'm proud of what I've done, my effort to date. And if that's not good enough, so be it. There'll be another pathway after this, and then just let what happens come. I don't think you don't have to live up to others' expectations, or it's what matters the most is yourself and your goals and what motivates you to get there, and just back yourself with that. But I'm interested in what the others have to say too. I think.
Sandra.
I'm really interested in that one, because I think the thing is that people think that expertise is knowing stuff. And in fact, I think with the learning sciences coming along as they are, the view is now developing that an expert is a person who leaves themselves open to failing and who learns a lot, not someone who knows a lot. And there's a big difference there. So you are not an imposter if you don't know. You would be an imposter if you pretended you know. And so I think that we're in this kind of world, like, who would have thought that COVID was going to do what it did to us this year and last year? But we've learned to cope. We didn't know what to do. So it's the capacity to learn that you should have and keep there all the time, not the belief that you know. So that's what I think.
I think that's a fantastic way of looking at it.
That's a great answer. That's really good.
But the next question, I'm hoping my son hasn't. Is there a way to deal with parents who are very disappointed in your ATAR? Who's going to tackle that? And I want Katerina to have a go after another panelist. So maybe who's going to have a go at that? Michael.
Oh, look, I think your parents' job is to support you, irrespective of whatever happens. So I'd be disappointed with parents who would express disappointment with their son or daughter's ATAR. I actually was amazed and delighted at the ATARs that both my sons got. I have absolutely no idea how they got the score that they did with the very little effort that both of them put in, I've got to be honest. But obviously they put much more in than I thought. So I would argue that a parent's job is to make young people feel safe, valued and listened to, and be supportive, help them recalibrate whatever goals and ambitions that they have. And the one person that we haven't talked about today is careers guidance officers in schools. I think they've got a tremendous role to play. And if you are feeling a little bit disenchanted with your results. Perhaps you need to take your parents along to a careers advisor and get some advice on what your options actually are.
Yeah, Katerina, how proud were your parents of you, and would they have supported you whatever your ATAR?
Yeah, I personally believe my parents would have supported me, like, no matter the ATAR. I guess it comes back to that idea that you're more than just a number, you're more than just an ATAR. In saying that, I feel like it comes down to expectations as well. And it can be really hard trying to please other people, like, more than just yourself. It might be your teachers, it might be your parents. As long as, like, I feel like the way you can tackle that is as long as you feel like you've done enough work and that you're proud of what you've done, I think that outweighs anyone else's expectation when it comes to that sort of thing.
Yeah, great answer. And I think actually it's probably quite a fitting place to end the question and answers. We've still got lots that we haven't been able to get through. We put aside quite a bit of time for questions. There were some great questions. I'm sure you'll all agree, panelists. Thank you for putting them in the Q&A. Just a reminder of what the journey that we've been on. We've looked at some sort of study strategies, some practical guides there. We've had some discussion on well-being and managing that. We've looked at the processes that, around ATAR scores and what they lead you into. But most importantly, I think, is to think beyond ATAR, and also to think about the complexity that means that we're all going to fulfill some sort of meaningful lives, irrespective of that ATAR score. So on that note, I'm going to hand back to Jane. Thanks very much, all the panelists.
Look, thanks, Sarath, and thanks to all our panelists this evening. I hope that you found that a very informative session. We will be sending out information to you, as Sarath said, and it highlighted to me, listening to the conversation, what a significant milestone that Year 12 is, and let's not underestimate how significant that is in people's lives. And as you head towards the exams, I really hope this session has helped. You are not your ATAR. Your ATAR is not you. That came across very clearly in the discussion this evening. And when you do get that score, it may be better or worse than you expect, and that is, I think, the reality of the situation. It may be better, it may be worse, but I hope that you found tonight there are some tips that you can take away, and that you can imagine yourself beyond the exams. What is it that you really enjoy? What is it that you're looking forward to doing after the exams are over? Imagine that, because really interesting and exciting opportunities do await you. And I think everyone here on the panel tonight was really emphasising that. So we hope that it's been of some use to you, and that if you want to keep up to date with the future events, you can follow us on Twitter, and I think Kate's probably going to put a little link into the chat. In the next few days, we're going to send everybody who registered for this session an email with links to resources and the topics from today's discussion. So I'd like to thank everyone, most of all the audience, and in particular, the Year 12 students. I do wish you every best success in your exams. May it be as a productive opportunity for you as it possibly can be. And I hope to see you again soon. So bye for now.